Standing in front of the mirror in my ivory silk gown, I could not stop smiling. In just 3 days, I would become Mrs. Marcus Rodriguez, and everything felt perfect. The dress fit like a dream, the venue was booked, and my future husband was the kindest man I had ever known. We had been planning this wedding for 8 months, and every detail reflected our love story. But I did not know that Marcus had already made a decision that would shatter everything I believed about him. A choice so devastating that it would force me to choose between my past trauma and my future happiness. Before I share what happened next, please let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Trust me, you will want to buckle up for this one, because what my fiancé did behind my back will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. My name is Brooke, and at 28 years old, I thought I had finally found my person. As a marketing manager in Portland, Oregon, I had worked hard to build a stable life after a childhood that was anything but stable. Marcus was everything I had dreamed of in a partner. This software engineer with gentle brown eyes and an easy laugh had swept me off my feet during a coffee shop encounter 2 years earlier. Our relationship had been a fairy tale from the start. Marcus was patient, understanding, and incredibly thoughtful. When he proposed at Crater Lake during a weekend camping trip, offering me his grandmother's vintage emerald ring, I knew I was the luckiest woman alive. He had gotten down on one knee as the sunrise painted the lake gold, telling me he wanted to spend every sunrise for the rest of his life watching me wake up beside him. Planning our wedding had been pure joy. We spent weekends touring venues, tasting cakes, and dreaming about our future together. Marcus's family had welcomed me with open arms from day one. His parents, David and Linda, treated me like the daughter they never had, and his younger sister Emma and I had become genuine friends. Sunday dinners at their house filled with laughter and warmth were everything I had never experienced growing up. But my own family story was drastically different. My father, Richard Thompson, had walked out on my mother and me when I was 12 years old. Those final years before he left had been a nightmare of broken promises, verbal abuse, and complete emotional neglect. Richard was an alcoholic who chose the bottle over his family every single time. I still remembered waiting by the window for hours when he promised to pick me up for my school play, only to find out later he had passed out drunk at some bar across town. After he left, my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. I watched her cry herself to sleep more nights than I care to remember, and I swore I would never let anyone hurt me the way Richard had hurt both of us. Over the years, he made a few pathetic attempts to reconnect, usually when he was between relationships or jobs, but I refused every single overture. The last time he tried to contact me was 6 years ago, and I had blocked him on every social media platform and changed my phone number. Therapy had helped me understand that his abandonment was not my fault, but the scars ran deep. I had worked incredibly hard to set healthy boundaries and surround myself only with people who respected and cherished me. Marcus seemed to understand this completely. 3 months before our wedding, we sat in his cozy apartment, going over the final guest list. The coffee table was covered with addressed envelopes, meal preference cards, and our carefully crafted seating chart. Everything was coming together beautifully, and I felt that familiar surge of excitement about our big day. Marcus, before we send these out, I need to be absolutely clear about something, I said, setting down my pen and looking him directly in the eyes. My father, Richard, cannot be invited to our wedding. Not now, not ever. This is non-negotiable. Marcus looked surprised for a moment. We had discussed my childhood briefly before, but I had never gone into specific detail about why I had cut my father out of my life completely. Are you sure, babe? I mean, it is your wedding day. Maybe this could be a chance to reconcile? He asked gently. I took a deep breath and shared stories I had never told anyone except my therapist. I told him about the nights Richard came home drunk and screaming the birthdays he forgot, the promises he broke, and the day he walked out without even saying goodbye. Marcus listened intently, holding my hand and nodding with understanding. I had no idea it was that bad, he said softly. Of course we will not invite him. I promise you, Brooke. Your father will have no part in our wedding day. This day is about us and our future, not your past. The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Marcus had really heard me, and he had chosen to protect me rather than push some outdated notion about family obligations. It made me love him even more deeply, and we spent the rest of the evening addressing invitations with renewed excitement about celebrating with the people who truly loved and supported us. 2 weeks before our wedding, I was having a final meeting with our wedding coordinator, Ashley, at the venue. We were going over last-minute details, confirming the timeline, and making sure every element was perfect. I was practically glowing with excitement as we checked items off our comprehensive list. "Everything looks wonderful, Brooke," Ashley said with a smile. "Oh, and I wanted to mention that your father Richard sent back his RSVP yesterday. He marked yes for the chicken entree." The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands started trembling, and I felt the blood drain from my face. "I am sorry, what did you say?" I whispered. Ashley looked confused by my reaction. "Your father, Richard Thompson. He returned his invitation yesterday and will be attending. Is everything okay?" She showed me the RSVP card, and there it was in handwriting I recognized from childhood report cards and birthday cards that stopped coming. My father's distinctive scrawl, confirming his attendance at the wedding he was explicitly not invited to. I excused myself and called Marcus immediately, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely dial his number. When he answered, I could hear the buzz of his office in the background. "Marcus, I need you to explain something to me right now," I said, my voice barely controlled. "Why did Richard receive a wedding invitation when you promised me he would not?" There was a long pause. "Brooke, I am in the middle of a really important meeting. Can we talk about this when I get home?" "No, we cannot wait. Ashley just showed me his RSVP card. He is planning to attend our wedding." "How is this possible when you looked me in the eye and promised he would not be invited?" Marcus sighed heavily. "Look, we will figure this out later, okay? I really cannot talk about this right now." The line went dead, and I stood there in the venue that was supposed to host the happiest day of my life, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed around me. How could the man I was about to marry have gone behind my back and done the one thing I had explicitly asked him not to do? What did this mean about his character, about our relationship, about everything I thought I knew about him? When Marcus finally came home that evening, he found me sitting on his couch with red, swollen eyes and the RSVP card in my lap. "Brooke, honey, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "Explain how you looked me in the eyes 3 months ago and lied to me. Explain how you violated the one boundary I asked you to respect. Please enlighten me." Marcus sat down heavily and ran his hands through his hair. "I did not lie to you. I meant what I said in the moment. But then I started thinking about it, and I thought maybe by the time the wedding came around, you might change your mind about having him there." "You thought I would change my mind about the man who abandoned and emotionally abused me as a child. Are you completely out of your mind? He is your father, Brooke. I know he made mistakes, but family is family. I just thought that on our wedding day, you would want to have both your parents there. It is traditional." The word traditional made my blood boil. Traditional. You know what else is traditional? Actually respecting your partner's clearly stated boundaries. Having basic human decency. Not going behind your fiancé's back to invite her abuser to their wedding. Marcus' defensive walls went up immediately. "He is not an abuser, Brooke. He made some mistakes when he was drinking, but people change. When I spoke to him, he seemed genuinely sorry for how things went between you two." The room spun around me. "When you spoke to him, you have been talking to my father. For how long?" Marcus looked caught, and I knew the answer was going to be worse than I imagined. "For about 6 weeks. He reached out to me through your cousin's Facebook page, and we have been having some conversations. Brooke, he really has changed. He has been sober for 2 years, and he just wants a chance to make things right with you." I stared at this man. I thought I knew this man I was supposed to marry in 2 weeks, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. "You have been having secret conversations with my estranged father for 6 weeks, and you did not think to mention this to me. You did not think I might want to know that the man who traumatized me was trying to get back into my life through my fiancé. I knew you would react exactly like this," Marcus said, his voice rising. you would shut it down immediately without even considering the possibility that he has changed, that this could be healing for you. You are right, I would have shut it down immediately because I am an adult who gets to decide who is in my life and who is not. That is called having boundaries, Marcus. Something you clearly do not understand or respect. The argument escalated from there, with Marcus doubling down on his position that I was being unreasonable and unforgiving. He kept using phrases like, "He is your father," and "family forgives," as if those magic words could erase years of trauma and betrayal. "If you cannot find it in your heart to forgive your father," Marcus said finally, "how am I supposed to believe you can forgive me when I make mistakes in our marriage?" That question hung in the air between us like poison. He was equating his calculated deception with whatever random mistakes might happen in a normal marriage, and he was using my trauma as a weapon against me. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and growing doubt about everything I thought I knew about Marcus. My best friend Diana came over every evening, validating my feelings and helping me process what had happened. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to minimize my concerns and pressure me to just get through the wedding and deal with the Richard situation afterward. "It is just one day," he kept saying. "You do not even have to talk to him. He can sit in the back, and then after the wedding, you can go back to not having contact if that is what you really want." But it was never just about one day. It was about the man I was about to marry making unilateral decisions about my life and my trauma. It was about him thinking he knew better than I did what was good for me. It was about him prioritizing some abstract concept of family over my emotional safety and well-being. I started noticing other controlling behaviors I had previously overlooked or dismissed. The way he made decisions about our social plans without consulting me. How he had opinions about my career choices and friendships. The subtle ways he had been trying to mold me into his version of an ideal wife. The morning of what was supposed to be my wedding day, I woke up in the bridal suite at the venue with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with pre-wedding jitters. My bridesmaids bustled around me doing hair and makeup, chattering excitedly about the day ahead, but I felt like I was watching everything through thick glass. Around 10 in the morning, there was a commotion outside the bridal suite. I heard raised voices in the hallway, and then Marcus burst through the door without knocking, looking frazzled and determined. "Brooke, your father is here early, and he really wants to see you before the ceremony. I think it would mean a lot to him if you could just say hello." My blood turned to ice. Through the open door, I could see a figure lingering in the hallway, and even from a distance I recognized Richard's hulking frame and graying hair. He looked older than I remembered, wearing an ill-fitting suit that had seen better days, but his presence still made me feel like that terrified 12-year-old girl hiding in her bedroom while her parents screamed at each other. "Get him away from me," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just 5 minutes," Marcus pleaded. "He has been sober for 2 years, and he really wants to apologize for everything that happened when you were a kid. This could be the closure you need." Before I could protest further, Marcus was ushering Richard into the bridal suite, and suddenly the man who had abandoned and terrorized me was standing 5 feet away from me in my wedding dress, surrounded by my bridesmaids, who had no idea what was happening. "Princess," Richard said, using the nickname he had called me before everything went wrong, "you look absolutely beautiful. I cannot believe my little girl is getting married." The sound of his voice brought back a flood of memories I had spent years trying to suppress. His promises to take me to the zoo that never materialized. The sound of bottles clinking in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. The way he would rage and storm out, leaving my mother crying and me wondering what I had done wrong. "I know I was not the father you deserved," Richard continued, his voice thick with what seemed like genuine emotion. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I hurt you and your mother in ways that were unforgivable. But I have been sober for 2 years now, and I go to meetings every day, and all I want is a chance to be the father you should have had." It was the same script he had used during his previous attempts at reconciliation, the same empty promises wrapped in different words. But what made this moment even more devastating was seeing Marcus standing behind Richard, nodding encouragingly, clearly believing that he had orchestrated some beautiful moment of healing. "I do not want you here," I said clearly, finally finding my voice. I asked you specifically not to come and you came anyway. That tells me everything I need to know about how much you have actually changed. Richard's facade started to crack immediately. I have driven 6 hours to be here for you, and this is how you treat me. Your own father. You stopped being my father the day you chose alcohol over your family. I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. And you lost the right to be part of my life when you abandoned us. Marcus stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with how the conversation was unfolding. Brooke, maybe we should discuss this later. The ceremony starts in an hour, and everyone is waiting. That was the moment I realized Marcus still did not understand. He thought this was about logistics and timing. He thought if we could just get through the ceremony, everything would work itself out. He had no comprehension of the fundamental violation he had committed by bringing my abuser into my sanctuary space on what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. Looking at both of them standing there, Marcus desperately trying to manage the situation, and Richard wearing his victim mask, I had a moment of absolute clarity. I could not marry a man who would ignore my explicitly stated boundaries. I could not promise to spend my life with someone who thought he knew better than I did about my own trauma and healing. Diana. I called to my best friend who had been watching the entire exchange with growing alarm. Can you please help me out of this dress? The room went completely silent except for the sound of rustling fabric and my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Brooke, what are you doing? Marcus asked, panic creeping into his voice. I am making the only choice that makes sense, I replied calmly. I cannot marry someone who has so little respect for my boundaries that he would ambush me with my abuser on my wedding day. Richard's mask slipped entirely. You ungrateful little brat. I am trying to make amends, and you are acting like a spoiled child. This is exactly why I left in the first place. And there it was. The real Richard emerging the moment he did not get what he wanted. The same man who had called me names and blamed me for his failures when I was a child. Thank you for reminding me exactly why I cut you out of my life, I said, as Diana helped me step out of my wedding gown. And thank you for showing Marcus who you really are before I made the mistake of marrying him. Marcus was begging now, promising he could fix everything that we could uninvite Richard and have the wedding anyway. But it was too late for damage control. The fact that he thought this was fixable showed me that he still did not understand the magnitude of what he had done. I put on the simple blue dress I had brought for the reception after party and walked out of the bridal suite to face our wedding guests. The church was packed with people who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with us, and I knew I owed them an explanation. Thank you all for being here today, I announced to the shocked crowd. Unfortunately, this wedding will not be taking place. I apologize for any inconvenience, and I hope you can understand that sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect ourselves. Some people gasped, others whispered among themselves, but I also saw several understanding nods, particularly from the women who had known me longest. Marcus's sister Emma actually hugged me and whispered, "You are braver than I would have been." Richard stormed out muttering under his breath about wasted time and ungrateful children, but I barely noticed. Marcus made one final desperate attempt to convince me to reconsider, promising he would never contact Richard again, but I was already mentally planning my next steps. There will not be a next time, Marcus, I told him quietly. This is who you are, someone who thinks his judgment is more important than mine, even about my own trauma. I deserve better than that. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of practical considerations and emotional processing. I had to cancel our honeymoon return, hundreds of wedding gifts, and figure out how to untangle our shared life. Diana let me stay at her house while I found a new apartment, and I took 2 weeks off work to figure out my next steps. Marcus called and texted constantly, at first leaving voicemails that ranged from desperate apologies to angry accusations that I was overreacting. When he started showing up at my office and my mother's house, I had to get a temporary restraining order. The man I had thought was gentle and understanding revealed himself to be entitled and manipulative when he did not get his way. I threw myself into therapy with Dr. Sarah, the counselor, who had helped me work through my childhood trauma years earlier. Together, We unpacked not just what had happened with Marcus, but the patterns that had led me to nearly marry someone who would violate my boundaries so completely. You attracted someone who seemed safe on the surface, Dr. Sarah explained during one of our sessions, but who ultimately wanted to control you in the same way your father did. The difference was that Marcus used love and concern as his weapons instead of anger and abandonment. The insight was painful, but liberating. I began to see how I had mistaken Marcus's desire to fix my relationship with my father for genuine care, when really it was about him wanting to be the hero of my story rather than supporting me in writing my own. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment across town and spent weekends decorating it exactly to my taste without having to compromise with anyone else's vision. I joined a hiking group and discovered a passion for landscape photography. At work, I poured my energy into a major campaign that earned me a promotion I had been hoping for. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely single and completely comfortable with that status. I had spent so many years focused on finding a partner that I had never really learned how to enjoy my own company. Now, Saturday mornings were for sleeping in and reading novels. Sunday afternoons were for long hikes in Forest Park. Tuesday evenings were for painting classes, where I was gradually learning to capture the Oregon landscapes I had fallen in love with through my camera lens. My mother and I grew closer during this period, bonding over our shared experience of having loved men who ultimately prioritized their own needs over our well-being. She had been furious when she learned what Marcus had done, and seeing her protective anger on my behalf helped heal something in our relationship that had been damaged by Richard's abandonment. "I am so proud of you for walking away," she told me over coffee one morning. "I should have been braver when you were young. I should have left Richard long before he left us." "You did the best you could with what you had," I reassured her. "And you raised me to know my worth, even if it took me a while to really believe it." I dated a few people casually after about a year, but I approached relationships completely differently now. I was upfront about my boundaries from the first conversation. I paid attention to how potential partners responded when I said no to things, even small things. I watched for signs of someone who wanted to fix or change me rather than accept and support me as I was. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, I was sitting in my apartment on a rainy Portland evening, looking through the photos from my latest hiking trip. My engagement ring sat in a small box in my jewelry drawer, not because I was holding on to the past, but because I had not decided what to do with a family heirloom that had become a symbol of my own strength. I had run into Marcus a few months earlier at a coffee shop downtown. He was with a new girlfriend who looked nervous and eager to please, and I felt a wave of pity for both of them. When he tried to approach me, I simply said hello politely and continued with my day. I felt nothing toward him, no anger, no sadness, just a profound gratitude that I had discovered his true nature before it was too late. Richard had made a few more attempts to contact me through various relatives, but I had maintained my boundaries firmly. My cousin had called to tell me he was asking for my address again, and I simply repeated what I had been saying for years. I was not interested in a relationship with him, and I would appreciate it if people would stop facilitating his attempts to contact me. "But he seems different now," my cousin had insisted, echoing Marcus's words from years earlier. "Maybe he is," I had replied. "But that does not change the fact that I do not want him in my life. His growth journey is separate from my healing journey, and I am not required to be part of his recovery process." The most profound change was in how I approached all my relationships. I had learned to trust my instincts completely, to speak up immediately when something felt off, and to walk away from anyone who tried to convince me that my feelings were wrong or unreasonable. When I started dating Jake, a fellow hiker I met on a photography expedition, I was clear about my history from early on. Instead of trying to fix my relationship with my father or convince me that Marcus had not been that bad, Jake simply listened and supported my choices. When I told him about my boundaries around family events and certain topics, he respected them without question. "Your boundaries are not suggestions," he said during one of our early conversations. "They are requirements, and anyone who really cares about you will honor them." It was such a simple concept, but it had taken me 30 years and a canceled wedding to really understand it. As I sat there on that rainy evening editing photos of the Columbia River Gorge, I realized I had never felt more at peace with my life. The wedding dress still hung in my closet, not as a reminder of what I had lost, but of what I had chosen to save myself. Some days, when I saw couples arguing in coffee shops or friends making excuses for partners who did not listen, I wanted to tell them what I had learned. That love without respect is not love at all. It is just another prison with prettier curtains. The question is not whether someone can change. The question is whether you are willing to wait around to find out and what pieces of yourself you will lose in the process. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, even when saying no costs you everything you thought you wanted. The rain continued to fall against my windows, and I smiled as I uploaded my favorite photo from the weekend, a sunrise over Mount Hood, bright and clear and absolutely perfect, just like the life I had built for myself on the other side of the hardest decision I had ever made. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I would love to hear your perspective on this. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your strength in difficult situations. And do not forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that their boundaries matter too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships that honor and respect who you are, not who someone else thinks you should become.